is Derek Diamond Experience.
Welcome to another episode of the Derek Diamond Experience podcast. I am your host, Derek Diamond, and if you haven't yet, be sure to check out last week's episode where I list my and your top 5 movie posters. Always fun to do the top 5 list, and already got a cool idea courtesy of one of the listeners, Wade Vatican, that we'll be doing at the end of April. So be sure to check out that in the coming weeks. But for this week's episode, I'm chatting with filmmaker Lee Chambers, and I found Lee's information on a website that I've been using periodically called podcastguest.com, and I was instantly drawn into his story because he's been making movies since the 90s, and I always love talking with filmmakers that have been in the industry or making films for an extended period of time because they've seen the evolution of the film industry going from film to digital, and especially as, you know, an aspiring director and having directed a couple of shorts myself, it was really cool to pick his brain about the directing process and got some really good advice from him, and so much so that we're actually going to have him back on the show sometime hopefully in the next few weeks before the show goes on break for the summer. So if you're an aspiring director or just an aspiring filmmaker in general, this will be a great conversation for you to hear. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Lee Chambers. Here with my very special guest this week, filmmaker Lee Chambers. Lee, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. I love being called a special guest when you've done 350 shows with a ton of special guests. So I'm very humbled to be here with you today.
No, I appreciate it, you know, and I found your, I believe it was podcastguest.com is where I found you, which is a resource that I've used periodically, and I found your story and thought you'd be a great guest to have on the show. And, you know, I love talking movies, so really, really excited for you to take the time to do it.
Well, fantastic. Yeah, I do a podcast too called Filmmaker GPS. I'm not as successful as you, but it's not like I'm pushing it too hard. But I have had some pretty interesting guests. I did it. I've only done 12 episodes to your 350. But again, talking movies, whether it's just about movies in general or actually making movies, that's obviously not only is it my passion, and it's also my hobby, and it's also everything. You know, you wake up and it's movies, and it's telling stories and being entertaining, and all the laughs, the scares, all the things why we watch movies in the first place.
Absolutely. And I wanted to start with asking you your story because there's not like a how-to guidebook on how to get into filmmaking. Everybody has their own unique way to do it or how they've gotten into it. So what made you want to get into filmmaking in the first place?
I've always been a storyteller, right? So, you know, as a kid, when you run around and you play with toys, I mean, I was the perfect age when Star Wars came out to get into the toys, and you buy all the action figures and you run around in the sandbox and you play with them. And in a way, you're finding a story and telling a story and recreating a story as a child. And I've always aspired to that and in different ways. And I think everybody, deep down, we're all storytellers. Just some of us gravitate towards ways of monetizing it or finding ways to actually make it work. So you can learn all the tools and you can learn all the, you know, how to use a camera and how to use lights and all that kind of stuff. But deep down, we are storytellers. Right back to when we would paint in caves, right? We would want to somehow share a little bit of our humanity with one another and inspire some kind of reaction. So I guess, geez, deep down, I think when you know it. I mean, I remember the first film set that I was on that I directed. I think it was 1996 when I was in film school, my thesis film in film school in Leeds, England. I remember being on the set and I was surrounded by 20 other like-minded folks, and I'm directing this movie, and the first time it's not just a little video camera with my just me and my couple friends. Now it's a big deal. There's an actual film camera. There's actors who are actually in television at the time that I'm directing for the first time, and I took a moment, almost like an out of body experience, where I remember just everything slowed down, and I watched. There was a scene going on in front of me where actors are saying the lines of dialogue, and everybody's doing their part on the in the cast and crew, and everything slowed down, and I just thought to myself, wow, it's happening, this is real, like I'm directing, and I can't do anything else. Like, people will ask you, what's your backup plan, what are you going to do as a backup plan? And there's no backup plan. I have to tell stories, and I have to enjoy the process of the journey of going through and making movies. I mean, we always have to do things to put food on the plate and to pay the bills and whatnot. But no matter what I've done, whether it's making a movie or doing other things, I'm always being creative and finding a way to do something. Whether it's create a social media post, or creating a movie, or writing a script, or writing a short story. It's always about how do I again, how do I inspire somebody, or entertain somebody? How can I tell a certain moral tale that will make somebody think a little bit about their lives, and or how can I make somebody, usually a lot of, well, what's funny is a lot of times it's, you know there's different reasons why do people do make movies. Somebody actually at a Q&A session once said, I noticed a theme. They showed four of my short films all in one go, and they said, what's the theme? And someone said, yeah, you kill a lot of people. And so, does that make me stable? I don't know. Because we create stories that are fantastic, and there's different kinds of filmmaking, and I tend to make things that are, um I don't know, I think grounded in humanity, but then it's the extremes of what if this goes wrong, which a lot of storytellers do. Because I'll watch a movie, and usually within 10 minutes in, the hero of the movie has a choice to make, to go on the journey or not. And I always think to myself, nope, they don't accept. End the credits. It's over. Like, every movie could be a 10-minute movie where the hero decides not to take that journey, not to rob the bank, not to go save the woman in distress, whatever the issue is. And so it's kind of fun being a storyteller, where you can push a character into a situation that can be extreme, and then wonder how you would how would you deal with it? Would you be a hero, or would you be a villain in a certain situation? That's a long-winded question. I kind of rambled and went off into all sorts of tangents for you to think about.
No, it's all good. It's funny you mentioning the hero making the choice to not, save the bank or whatever the case may be. It makes me think of those memes I've been seeing of Star Wars, where it's like, one of the characters makes a logical choice, and then the final slide is written and directed by George Lucas. So you're absolutely right. It's all about the choices that the hero makes, and I'm with you in the sense that I've kind of learned that, and I've only made two shorts, but I've worked on a couple of other ones as well, and I feel like that's kind of my wheelhouse, is telling stories that are grounded in reality, that can make you think,
Mm-hmm.
about choices, that what if you had made a different choice, years ago, where would your life be? Stuff like that. So it really is, and anyone who's listening to this that wants to be a filmmaker, that is part of the journey, is finding your voice and finding the stories that you're good at telling. You should try different things, but I think once you find what you're good at, that's what you should stick with. But I did want to ask you, because you mentioned you went to school in England. Why England?
Well, you know what? I was born and raised in Canada, but my family is from the Yorkshire area, in West Yorkshire area in England. And in the 90s, I found out that I could get a British passport, and they said, "Yep, you can get a passport, and you can be a British citizen." And I did it, and I went and backpacked around Europe, and I decided to stay for a bit. And I thought, well, I'll stay for 6 months. Well, it went on for years. And I at that point, I have a background in advertising, art, and graphic design. I went to college in Canada, and I finished. And when I finished doing college, I realized that I I didn't really think I had access to being a filmmaker. Everyone thinks you go to Hollywood, you got to be a filmmaker. And at that time, if you wanted to make a film, it had to be on film, right? It was a very expensive medium. And nowadays everybody can grab a phone and become a filmmaker. So the back in the 90s, it was like, how can I do it? And I was in England, um, and I walked past Leeds Metropolitan University, which is now Leeds Beckett University, and there's a sign for a film school, and I just walked in the door and just said, "Really, I can do this," and I did, and so and I was really lucky because some of the other film students that were there, it was a very small film school, but they shot on Super 16 mil film, and we made some really good stuff. They had a broadcast deal with Yorkshire Television to actually screen the films on TV when you were done. And the cinematographer that I work with, a guy named Mark Stewart, he had about 12, 15 years of experience already as a cinematographer, but it was all in animation, like stop motion animation. And he was trying to get into live action work, and everybody said, "Mark, I know you understand the camera, but stick to the big sets and actors. Leave that to the real cinematographers. You stick to your little models and stuff like that." And he was doing like things like Wallace and Gromit and things like that, which some very well known stuff and at the time. And he went to the film school primarily because it was like going to the casino. He plopped his money down for his tuition, and he got a chance to shoot 3 or 4 films that had budgets. The school, because they had a broadcast deal, actually had a budget. So he was the first guy who I worked with as a cinematographer. And so here's a guy who's got 12, 15 years of experience. And the year before he went to film school with me, he had 2 films up for the Academy Awards for Best Animated Short Film. And
Wow.
didn't win, but 2 out of 5 films you were the cinematographer for. So my learning curve just went like, right? Because I got this guy he's going to film school to transition from one area to another area, and to prove that he can handle sets and actors and bigger sets. And so I was surrounded by really good people, I learned a lot. And that's one of the big pieces of advice I would give anyone listening who wants to make movies is, you can get together with your buddies and you can make a movie, but sometimes you fumble along and you make lots of mistakes as you go along. And if you can find somebody to be a mentor, or somebody who's done it before, who can tell you the advice for how to do things in a better way, or in the way that it's the industry standard way of doing something that will save you time, ensure less mistakes, hopefully improve the quality of your work, take it. For 15 years, I taught at a practical film school. So I kind of oversaw, I don't know, 3,000 short films of a wide range of quality. A lot of them are crappy, and they're because they're just learning, but there's some that are absolute gems and amazing. And it was always fantastic in a 2-year film program to see how people mature and grow even in 2 years, when you show them how to use the pencil or the computer or the typewriter, because a lot of the tools are just tools, right? So I can give you a paintbrush and go, "Hey, Derek, go and paint this picture," but what really counts is what's in here, what's in your head, the ideas that you have, and your ability to listen to advice and suggestions, and to train and to when you look at anybody at the Olympics, that usually the difference between gold and fourth place is the person that got the gold spent a little bit more time at the track, a little bit more time in the pool. They just wanted it more, and but they took the advice of trainers and they worked harder for it. And so sometimes my film students didn't take the advice, and sometimes they did. And so I learned a lot early in England working with good actors and good camera people and good technical people. And then it basically just in your everything else that I do move forward. I expect my cast and crew to be top notch. I expect everyone to put in their 100%.
And that's not too dissimilar from my philosophy as well, because I didn't go to film school. I just kind of wanted to do it, and I ended up falling in love with it. But that's what you should do, is you should surround yourself with people who are more experienced and, quite frankly, are better than you at what you're trying to do, because that's how you become better. And because I've met so many people that, like you mentioned, some of your students that, they think they know everything, so they don't take any advice, and they usually fall flat on their face. And sometimes that's half the fun, is that's how you learn, is by screwing up,
Yeah.
because then how not to do it again. As someone, you said you made you directed your first film, your thesis film, in '96. Were you nervous at all when you did that?
Oh, of course. And who wouldn't be? I mean, like I say, prior to that, it was a camera that we borrowed from our local library, where you rent it for a weekend, and it's just a video camera. You turn it on, you just shoot. You don't, I'm not worrying about the technically how it works, but you get a picture when you play it back on your TV, and then suddenly you're trying to demystify the whole process. I'm shooting on a 16 mil camera, but I'm recording the sound on another device. How do they get together? How does this work? And it was not only was it shot on 16 millimeter Super 16, it was actually edited on a Steenbeck. So it was actually edited on film as
Wow.
well. So, and I was right at that edge where things started changing into nonlinear editing. So one film I made was shot and edited the old-fashioned way, and the next one was suddenly I'm into nonlinear editing, and it just changed the whole world. But yeah, of course, very nervous. And I was so one of the things that I learned to do was I literally dreamt and planned and planned and planned, and I started thinking every scenario, and I created I had like a 10-page short film script, and I basically drew a floor plan for every shot, and where I thought the camera should be roughly, and then a storyboard, and I had them all together in a pile, and I got together with luckily I had the really good cinematographer, but I also had a really good. Everyone else was fantastic, but a really good first AD, and we were
It's
going to
very
shoot over
important.
right, and we were going to shoot over 4 days, and they basically took my 40 pages or 50 pages of shots that I wanted to try to get. And we were shooting on the top of a building, and they realized this is where I started realizing the complexities of it, is that we're trying to shoot a film that takes place in one day over 4 days. And so you have the sun going across the sky all the time. So we can't shoot it in order. We have to shoot it all out of order and out of whack, and then bring up some lights to replicate the sun to make sure the shadows are always right, and we shuffle things into the right order. And it was I remember it was just watching them go through this process about how they decide when to shoot. I'm like, they would just tell me we're shooting scene 5, shot 6 now, and I'm like, okay, I don't know how you decided that, but it put me in I learned a lot about being a director, in that the director has to find a way to work with the actors to maintain a level of performance when you're jumping all over the place. So, okay, this is a scene, after you found out your daughter died, and then later we're going to do the scene before she's dead, and so the actor's going through this wide range of emotions, and it's all over the place. And then eventually, the editor gets it and puts it into the right order. And if you make the wrong decisions with actors, and the actors are there to trust you. So if you're not on top of it with the actor's journey, it's a mess, right? Because you have actors who are like, why is he not worried? Why is he not freaking out? His daughter just died. And you're like, shit, I just did the wrong emotion at the wrong time because I got sidetracked with other things. So I learned a lot about that part of it for sure. And one of the things that I picked when I did film school was we didn't write our own scripts. So there was a master's program that where a screenwriting program where they wrote scripts prior to us. When I showed up, they just handed like 30 scripts in our faces and said, "Here, we're going to make 6 of these." And it was fun in that process because we read all the scripts and then we were supposed to like work on who's going to make what, whatever. And I picked this film called On the Roof about a bank robber who robs his own bank, and then as he's escaping ends up on the roof, and then he confronts a guy who's bored with his life who sits on the top of buildings. And so they have this relationship where they kind of, what's the meaning of life, and what, how do you keep life interesting and whatever. And so I thought it was a very well written script that I thought it was very funny, and it was a very, telling and moving kind of story. Nobody wanted to make it at my film school because they thought it was too wordy. There's a lot of dialogue in it. And they said, well, there's no fancy shots. I can't use a crane, and I can't do underwater shots, and there's no explosion. And at the end of the day, I kind of lost out. Nobody wanted to do it at first. And then a script editor from the BBC came in to work with us, and he flipped through the box of scripts, and he said, I'm really surprised that nobody picked On the Roof because it's the best script in the box. This is, out of all the scripts, this is the best one. And I'm like, I told you, I knew that was the one to pick. And literally from that, one of the members of the panel, when we were pitching them, said, it sounds like you have vision for this. You noticed that this is a good script. And so she said, if you want to direct it, I'll produce it for you. And so that's why I sort of got my chance. So it was very early. I think I had an ability to be able to see what works as a story. Even for something I didn't write, it was just being able to read it and go, these characters feel alive. I identify with them. I have empathy for them. And so this would make, if it's done right, it would make interesting entertainment. Now, just saying all that, we were all worried about the sun over 4 days, but the first day was beautiful, sunny. Everyone got sunburned on the back of their necks. And then, of course, it's England. So what happens on day 2? Cloudy. Day 3, cloudy, rainy. And so this whole sun thing went out the window. And by day 4, our last day, it was almost like hail. It was miserable. The film actually looks horrible in many ways because the continuity is all out the window. Nowadays, you'd shoot on a green screen and it would look fantastic and you'd be able to control it. But the experience of making that and going through that whole process, every filmmaker needs to go through a process like that, and you need to have the ups and downs. It is, like I say, it is a journey, right? So it's not a destination, it's a journey.
Yeah, it's almost like trial by fire to a degree. Like you can learn all about it in school, or these days you can do master classes or other online classes, but physically doing it is a whole different thing. And now that I've experienced that a couple of times, I understand that.
Yeah, when you're looking at spending 12, 14 hours a day, where, especially as a director, because like a director has to be on it. At the end of when I shot a feature film, and I remember at the end of the day, some of the camera guys and girls they'd say, hey, we've wrapped for the day and come up for a beer. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? Like my brain is still buzzing and thinking about what I need to do tomorrow. Like I can't stop. I mean, you can stop. Like, for example, like a cameraman worries about the shot, making the shot that you want look great. Meanwhile, the director is thinking about, will this shot, how important is it to the editor that I have this shot? I now need to be thinking like all the actors in it. So a director needs to be an actor because they need to be able to get themselves in the same emotion as the actor. So it's funny. So you have, the cinematographer the director really is trying to anticipate everybody's needs, and so you're answering 10,000 questions an hour from everybody to give them your vision for what you want, and they're then running around trying to make it happen for you. And if you make poor decisions along the way, that's where it all goes to hell. I mean, when you watch most films, I think nobody, I think, goes into making a film to make it crappy, but we know what it's like. When there's you don't movies you don't like, and nobody, I think, goes into that. And you might say, well, I like the movie, but they really miscast this character, that character, or I just didn't like the camera work, or I didn't like the score was horrible, or the production design looks horrible. And one of the big complaints I used to have about student films was a student would actually have a good script and thinking, great. And then you at least have the starting blueprint. You have the basis nucleus of what you really need to start with, which is a decent story. But because they're usually not proficient yet, or is 80% of it would be great in terms of they get this great location, and then there'd be a shot in their dorm room with a white wall behind them and nothing. And I'm thinking, it looked like a really good movie until you ran out of steam, just decided to shoot in your dorm room with a white concrete wall behind you, and it looks like a student film. And so I always say that, what's the most important thing about making a film? Well, you need a really good script, obviously. And then you need good sound, and you need good picture, and you need good production design, and you need good acting. And the problem is you need 100% in all of those things. Like, one thing drops too low and it drags everything down, pulls the audience out of that their feeling as they're watching the movie, when something just doesn't feel like it's working, right? And then suddenly it's like the movie's it's all right, right? And then you don't remember it a week later because whatever, the sound bothered you, or the actor bothered you, or there was something else going on. So yeah, I was, if you're not nervous directing a movie, I still get nervous directing a movie because I believe in it so passionately. I believe in trying to get this done, and there's nothing actually. I directed a movie called The Pineville Heist, which is on Amazon Prime, and we shot for like 24 days or whatever, 25 days. And I was more nervous on the last couple of days because I'm thinking to myself, we're this close to finishing. What if it all goes to hell now, right? What if we don't finish, get all the shots we need to get done, and then I never finish this movie? And that happens to a lot of people, where especially when they're low budget, they kind of run out of steam. You know what I mean?
Well, it's one of those things that, like you said, shooting for weeks on end, you want to finish strong, because it's like you can, in a lot of things, you can kind of slow down a bit when you're close to the end. But no, you want to finish strong, and like you said, make sure everything is 100%, because it's so important, from picture quality to sound to production design. And I use this analogy a lot, that a film is like a machine, and all the different departments are cogs in the machine. If one of them stops working, it screws everything else up.
I've heard you say that, Derek, and it's probably because I think you probably want to attend one of my classes. You're right. It's like it is a military precision, right? If one of the cogs doesn't turn properly, then it messes up everything. And one of the things I used to do is I used to take a triangle and go, okay, so what a triangle? And when you look at the top of a triangle, that's, the director and producer are at the top. They control everything, and then the hierarchy goes down. And so what's at the bottom of the triangle? There's all these people. A runner, right? A production assistant is at the bottom of the triangle. But I turn the triangle upside down, and I say, well, I know the director is this all important person, and everybody's like bowing down to, oh, here's the director. They're so powerful. But in the middle of the shoot, when a gaffer says, quick, looks at a runner and says, can you go to the back of the lighting truck and get me an apple box? And the runner, goes and gets the apple box. At that point, the runner is the most important person on the set, because nothing's happening. We're not turning over the camera. We're not shooting anything. And so at that point, everybody's sitting around waiting for the runner to complete their task so that they can continue. That's why they call it a runner, like go, right? At this point, we need you to run, go get it and come back, because every second that you're gone, we're not shooting. And so it was really important. And I listened to the podcast you did with Eric Roberts. And it was interesting because he was sounded like such a humble guy and about his career. And it was great about be treating people with respect and dignity, no matter whether the talent, right? They've got the trailer and they're getting all the money and the big bucks, or whether they're a runner. You never know who on the way up and you're going to meet on the way down. And so, another big piece of advice is just to be kind to people and be humble and be thankful to people. I had a friend of mine who said he worked on some big movies with I'm gonna forget his name now, but he worked on a movie with an actor, and he said he used to buy lottery tickets for the cast and crew and stuff like that, and all these little things where it's like, he's getting hundreds of thousands of dollars, so he spends $300 and he buys a lottery ticket but he made a point of going around and handing over I think Hugh Jackman, I think it was Hugh Jackman. Yeah. And he was basically would like, hey, good work. He would like, good work today. I appreciate you. You made sure I look good. And so here, and he would hand a lottery ticket. And I actually took that on board on my set a couple of times, where it's like, buying beers for the cast and crew and buying a lottery ticket for everybody. And hey, if you get a winner, great. But it's just a nice thing to do for people, because especially on low budget stuff, a lot of times people are working for next to nothing, right? The pure love and passion of it, the ability to have a credit and an experience on a movie, just to be thankful for what they've done is for their time. And it could be as simple as simple things. I shot a short film once where somebody's job for a whole day was standing at the bottom of a hill out of sight, directing traffic so they didn't come through the set. And I remember halfway through the day, I sent another PA down. I said, can you go down and see if somebody can give John a break? He's been down there all day with his high visibility vest. Give him a break. Poor guy's been working. And the runner came back 2 minutes later and goes, no, he's happy. He's good. I'm thinking, really? Oh. And after the shoot, I'm like, dude, you were a trooper. Like, if you're willing to work all day long and do this job, which would be considered the worst, crappiest job on a film set, with a smile on your face, you're the kind of guy I want on all my sets. And I wouldn't want you doing the same thing again. I'd want to elevate you up. I want to say, you're rewarded. I want you to do this now. But sometimes young filmmakers, I think they think, well, I'm not doing that. Right. I'm not doing that.
You can have the most talented person in the world, but if they have a terrible attitude, you want nothing to do with them. Like the person you mentioned that was directing traffic, I'd want 30 of those types of people on all sets that I work on. Because that kind of attitude, that's incredible.
Yeah, I worked on one in Australia, a feature film. I was an associate producer on it, so I didn't have like a small job. I was an associate producer on it. But I was on set all day long. And I remember one day the producer said, "Hey, look, one of our PAs got stuck in traffic. They can't be they're whatever, an accident happened. They couldn't get in, and they're like, we're a person down. Can you go and just stand and hold a light in the forest away from the set for like an hour?" And I'm like, sure. And so what's funny is I'm not a runner. I'm like higher up there, but I'm like, whatever you need. And I remember going out and standing basically in the dark as this big light way up in the sky is shining into the forest. And I'm just standing there doing it. And I'm like, and I thought to myself, I'm on a beach near the woods in Australia going, I'm making movies. This is exciting. I was so excited that I got I'm doing something and it's being productive. In actual fact, in that case, the weirdest thing happened was while I was there. It's like, well, some people go, well, what do you need? It's sandbagged. It's all good. What do you need to be there for it? I mean, why do you need someone there to be there with the light? The light actually exploded. So I can hear in the radio, the DP going, what happened to the light? and then there's flames coming out of it, and I'm like, shit. So I actually, because I was there, I had to lower the light down a little bit away from the branches, and then I took the sandbags off, carried the light out while it's flaming into the parking lot, and then laid it down in the parking lot where it wasn't going to like cause a forest fire. And it was like, okay, that's why we have, from a safety point of view, somebody there to hold the light, to be there just in case. So it was a perfect example of, of covering yourself from a safety point of view, and just, what could go wrong? Well, what happens if the light falls over? What if it bursts into flames? And 99 times out of 100, it's not going to. But I happened to be there the one time when it burst into flames, and it could have started a forest fire. And so it's being humble and saying, it doesn't matter what my job is. If it helps the production at this point in time, I'll do it. And I did it with a smile on my face, thinking about the guy who was standing at the end of the road when I was the director.
That's a great mentality to have, for sure. As we start to wrap up here, I did have one more question to ask you. I was looking at a lot of your different projects, and they've won numerous awards from different festivals around the world. How important are film festivals to you, and should current filmmakers? I know COVID changed a lot with, it shut a lot of festivals down, but now with things ramping back up, do you still consider festivals to be important?
Well, I mean, the main thing is, you want to show your film. I mean, I look at festivals that have live screenings, so there's an opportunity for people to see it. I mean, if you can attend a festival, you never know who you might meet, which is great. And I've met some great people at festivals, to the point where I've actually flown them in to work with them as actors and as crew, because I met them at a film festival. Been approached at film festivals about people wanting to distribute my stuff. So there can be tremendous value. Obviously, it's a matter of researching the festival to make sure they're legit, and that there's a value to it. Look at their website, and I've actually reached out to some people who've been selected to see what it's like, and is it a good festival to go to? Is there an opportunity to meet people that you might be able to network with, or whatever. And sometimes those seeds grow and sometimes they don't, but it's always, you never know who's there. So they're worth it for that. I found after COVID, the cost of travel and flights and hotels has just gone up so dramatically. It's been hard for me to get to many festivals. I will say, like, where, for example, I know you were talking in your thing about the Oscars, and about the value of the Oscars, and what's the value of awards. It's funny when I think of like nominations and awards, because I used to always tell people, yeah, my films have been selected by hundreds of festivals. I've won hundreds of awards and nominations for lots of shorts over the years, and my feature. And it's nice to get the awards. Obviously, I mean, if the Academy wanted to give me an Oscar, I wouldn't return it down. I mean, I wouldn't, you know what I mean? I wouldn't do Marlon Brando it and return it. But it is I call it a bullshit economy, meaning how do you, a bunch of films go in and somebody goes, I like this one more. It's how do you qualify what's better than another thing? And so, it's nice to get them, but for example, my most recent film, which is on the circuit right now, is called Wicked Plans. I submit to one festival and I win best of the festival. I submit to another one, I get rejected even before it even gets considered. There's a lot of dynamics as to why you get in, why you don't. A lot of times it's down to a festival has 3 days to screen films. They only have so many screens that they can show it on. They get 1,000 entries. Even if your film is good, you might not get in. So you take with a grain of salt whether you get in or not, and if you win or not. I mean, I've won at festivals where I just submitted and I thought, whatever, and then I win. And other festivals I wanted to get into, I don't. And you never know. Right, you never know what's going to happen. But one of the things I always try to do is I do engage with them. So I follow when I get in. I'm following their social media. I'm liking their posts. I'm sharing stuff out. I'm retweeting and Instagramming my screening times for folks, and trying to be as engaged as possible, tuning into some of their live streaming events if they have them, and going. I mean, if you can go and get to one of some of these events. I know you've done, like, was it Pensacon or whatever? You've done some of the, some of those. We My films do really well in the sort of the Comic-Con kind of events, right? It's the I don't do well at these bigger festivals where they're looking for a really gritty, hard-edged human story that is, whatever. Mine are, they're good and fluff entertainment. I mean, it's just a good laugh and whatever. So I seem to do well at the genre festivals. But yeah, if you can go to them and meet people, that's the way to do it.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. Do you have a website or social media that you'd like to plug so the viewers and listeners can follow you?
Oh yeah, by all means. Just my name, leechambers.com. I was smart enough to become a .com years ago, where I update all sorts of stuff. There's a bunch of short films that are on there, and some details about some of the screenwriting projects and whatnot. And I always, whether one of the things I always do on a podcast, I always say, if Denzel Washington's listening, get in touch with me, and I'll add Eric Roberts in there if he happens to tune in. So we all want to work with good people in the industry, whether it's in front of the camera or behind the camera, and yeah, it's been great sharing even some of these stories. And I haven't really talked about them for a long time, but when you've done enough stuff over the years, you collect a lot of great stories that you may not realize are great inspiration for down the road, like getting stuck in the woods with a burning light. Doesn't seem like it's the sexiest story to tell about the film industry, but if you're in this thing long enough, everyone will have one of these crazy stories. I remember that time when, and if you can grow from it and learn from it and become a better filmmaker, by at the end of it, then you're in the business you should be in.
Absolutely. And there's so many things that I don't think we even scratched the surface on. So if it's good with you, I would love to have you back on soon for maybe a part two, because we haven't even talked about script writing.
Oh yeah, and that's what I've been. A lot of script writing is great because when COVID hit, I had the biggest burst of screenwriting stuff. That I ever had. Suddenly have a lot of time to be busy writing, and I got some screenwriting. Started actually getting paid for it, which was
That's awesome.
fantastic. That you can kind of, someone appreciates your skill. And the great thing about screenwriting is you don't need to raise $1 million to do it, right? So I spent 6 years trying to make my Pineville heist, basically begging, borrowing, stealing, getting shut down from all the funding agencies in Canada to make it, because nobody trusts you until you've made something, and how do you make something until you have the money? And so it's finding the money to make films is a pain in the ass. Even here in Canada, where we have a lot of, there's a lot of opportunities from grants and support and whatnot, and a lot of stuff that Americans see is actually made in Canada. They don't realize it, right? That there's a lot of content because they come up and get their 30 cents on the dollar because the Canadian dollar's cheaper, and then they get another 30% in tax breaks. So we kind of steal a lot of jobs up this way. But screenwriting is great because you have an opportunity to create a whole new world and put words into a character's mouth, and then backspace and change it and put something else in their mouth, and you can play around with it and role play it and spend time developing this whole new world without needing anything other than final draft or a screenwriting program, or if a pencil and paper and a notepad. You can learn and create from that. I'd love to come back and chat about that for sure.
Absolutely. Well, Lee, thank you so much for taking the time to have this wonderful chat. It was great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you once again to Lee Chambers for that awesome conversation about directing and filmmaking. As we said, we'll definitely have him back on to discuss screenwriting and do more of a deep dive into some of his shorts as well as his feature film. sometime in the next coming week. So be on the lookout for that episode, and be sure to check out his website, leechambers.com. For next week, I'll be chatting with camera operator Steve Matzinger, who has worked on shows such as Westworld, Ray Donovan, and many others. And it's not very often that I have cinematographers or those who work directly with cameras on the podcast. So that's going to be a really fun discussion. Be sure to come back next week for that fun episode. But until then, you can check out linktree.com/DDiamondPodcast if you want to subscribe to the show. You can find links to the YouTube channel as well as all forms of social media for the show. Again, linktree.com/DDiamondPodcast. And if you could, please leave a review for the podcast. It's very important, actually, because the more reviews and ratings that I get, the more visible the show becomes for those who are searching for podcasts. In this case, interview-based shows, if I get more reviews and people search interview podcast, this will be one of the first to pop up. So it's really important that I get more reviews. I haven't gotten any since 2020, actually. So if you could just leave a review and rating, that would be very much appreciated. But that's going to do it for this week's show. Thank you once again to Lee Chambers. I am your host, Derek Diamond, and we'll see you guys back here next Monday for another awesome episode of the Derek Diamond Experience podcast.